Hey there, and welcome to Work Dope, a podcast on the messiness and the potential of humans at work. I'm Linda Stacy, and I am a corporate sellout who likes to think of herself as a corporate innovator. And I think that working in corporate America doesn't have to suck, although at least about 80% of the workforce thinks that it does, probably about 80% of the time. We're often unsatisfied. We're not getting what we need from work. But on the flip side of this, of course, is that we're expecting more and more out of work. We are looking to work to create our identity and meaning and sense of purpose in our lives. At least some of us are some of the time. The pandemic has really forced us to look at this more. The great resignation is a sign of this. And more of us are looking at what it is to have quality of life at work and what culture really means inside of organizations. I do think that business is cool. I am not anti-corporate America. I think that building things and creating really awesome solutions for real world problems, which is what most companies are setting out to do, that these are all really great ways to kind of manifest or to grow as a human and as a group of humans together. So a couple of things about this recording. It's a conversation with couples therapists, Christy Gaisford and Jerry Sander. And I want to say a couple of things. At the start of the pandemic, so 2.5 years ago or so, I started doing some of my own personal study with this man, Richard Rudd, who is someone out of England. But I was just beginning to really learn and understand how relationships are really fundamental to human potential and growth. So whether it's our primary relationship or people who we spend a ton of time with, if we're actually willing to kind of go through the middle of what makes relationships difficult, therein we are really given the opportunity for the most growth. Of course, if we're leaning on strategies that are just, kind of backing up, resisting, not really engaging in the conflict, we're not really going to get the best that we could out of these opportunities. But many of us don't have the lessons or the tools or the mechanism to actually use the strife to get to somewhere better at the end. So I miraculously was introduced to Jerry a few weeks ago when I posted a question to a Facebook group. I'm part of a Facebook group that has thousands of podcasters on it, and people are always asking questions about various things. And Jerry was one of the people that responded, and he ended up volunteering to be on the show. And then I invited he and Christy. So they have their own show called Love Work, and I'm going to link to it, of course, in the notes. This episode is so rich. It holds so many seeds for a lot of conversations to come. Of course, these two work primarily with couples, but so many of the things that we deal with in relationships, whether it's a coworker, a boss, even, someone who you're not as close to within an organization, there are so many things to think about in this episode and some ideas for how to maybe do things a little bit better. There are tons of seeds here for future conversations for my podcast. I know that. We talk about things like, being a victim and how this is complicated by the nature of hierarchy at work. Do you have any other options but to kind of feel like a victim and us versus them when you're kind of in the lower ranks? How do you have a voice in this type of environment? How do you actually demonstrate rapport and caring when you're the person who is the leader? What does that really look like to someone who's below the leader, if you will? And then again, I always like to ask the question around what satisfying work looks like. So I asked Jerry and Christy to give me an idea of what satisfying work looks like for them. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoyed talking to Jerry and Christy. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Christy. How are you today?
Hi.
Good.
Doing
How
well.
are you?
I am well, too. Thank you. I am very excited, or as I would say here in Boston, I'm wicked excited to have you on today.
Wicked glad to be with you, Linda.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Yes. So I have today two couples therapists, Jerry Sander and Christy Gaisford. Jerry and Christy, I'm just giving a few deets on what I know about Jerry and Christy, and then I'll invite them to say some things as well. But Jerry and Christy have their own podcast called Love Work, and it's the podcast world by which I was introduced to Jerry. And just listening to several of their episodes from my own experience, for me, it's really helped me to think about my own role within my primary relationship, my marriage. And I feel like that has to extend by default to other relationships in my life. So it's been very cool to have that. I've appreciated the moments for reflection, really, in my own headspace, which is different from being in therapy where you're you're kind of in a conversation. So it's kind of a nice alternative, not alternative addition, I would say.
Mhm.
Jerry and Christy also run relationship boot camps in Utah and New York, perhaps other places at some point, and also online. And what else would you two like to share about yourselves, your background, what you do?
Christy, you go first.
Okay. I'm a relationship therapist. I am a mother of four, and I also have four stepchildren. I'm on my second marriage. I live in Utah, and I love doing this work.
Awesome.
I also have four children. It's a wonderful second marriage for me. On my mind right now is why won't my lawnmower start out back? We were just talking about motorcycles. The motorcycle starts, the lawnmower won't start. So that's something to know about me. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and the challenge of this work that Christy and I are doing is to make it real for our own lives, our own respective marriages. And it doesn't mean anything unless you really can live it. Then we try and show that and share that with other people.
And you absolutely do. It feels really indulgent to engage with you both today on topics around relationships and potentially how these patterns in our relationships, how we react, how we respond, how we get our needs met, how these reactions and experiences parallel to life inside of work as well, the extensions there. So again, so much to talk about. Perhaps I'm over ambitious today. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to talk about one of the things that I say in the intro to all the podcasts I've done so far. I touched briefly just on this concept of mattering and feeling valued, and that some people are relying on that more and more at work. Some people say that we're getting away from that, and people also rely heavily on the relationship for feelings of mattering and being of value. And I'm asking this open-ended question. How do we know that we're valued in relationships? How would you respond to that? I don't know how you all want to go back and forth here with responding. Should we start this time with Jerry and then I'll go to Christy?
Sure. We also love interrupting each other.
Okay,
so
great.
We're great at that. Yikes. This goes to the real challenging issue of how do you help someone you care for feel cherished? And it's generally not the same as how you would feel cherished. Like we've all been in that situation where you've given away a really good gift to someone that you would really like. And they're like, oh, gee, thanks. You feel like, oh, why did that not register as an amazing gift?
Right.
Because it's not really them. So being able to key in on what makes that other person feel really special and seen and valued. That's the hard part, I think, in a relationship. That's a marriage or any lasting partnership. And it's also hard at work too. It can be kind of what you think of as a small thing, but I think the most important factor is curiosity. Do you really want to know, or do you just think you know and you're going through the motions pro forma? Having real curiosity about someone you love means asking questions and then listening.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I used to work at a big hospital, and the management came in with all these changes, and it was crazy because we all looked around at each other like they didn't even ask us how it goes or how these changes will affect anybody. And I think people want to know that their opinion matters, that their feelings about something matter, their feelings aren't right or wrong, and that their experience is valued, that they have something to offer. And as Jerry said, that comes by taking the time to ask and listen and care what their answer is.
And very generally speaking, I know we're going to be talking broad strokes and that not everything applies to every human. If when folks are not good listeners or don't understand the importance of that, I guess, are there common reasons or the ways that are showing up? Are these individuals who it would be better if they could listen, perhaps?
Oh, it'd always be better. I mean, the advice I would give people who struggle to really listen is to attune to the smallest things. One exercise we do with people who are overwhelmed by anxiety, for instance, is to take the time to notice around them right now five things. Five things. That squirrel on the roof over there, the clouds. I see the trees. Just really take the time to notice that and breathe while you're doing that. It's not that different if you're dealing with an employee. Take the time to notice the pictures on their desk or things that they've done to make the place look nice, or what kind of coffee are they drinking, or what are they eating. Connecting on those things is not as small as you think. It makes you human, like you're joining in with another human instead of being over them,
Yeah, this is reminding me of an experience in my own corporate work life where we heard through the grapevine that some people in the higher echelons, the partners in the company, had gone to, like, I don't know what it's called, relationship management school for executives. And one of the things that they clearly had learned was to like put your hand perhaps like on the shoulder of someone. It was like this very, very like, I don't know, orchestrated thing. But, and I've experienced this too, where, I mean, here's my impression, just as from the underlings perspective, that I feel like someone thinks they're supposed to be interested or notice something, but they're not really sure how to go about it. And then it ends up
they're
coming
not really
off as,
interested.
Well, there's that for sure. In some cases, though, I feel like maybe they want to do better, but they don't have the time. They don't have the energy. They feel like they don't have the emotional bandwidth. Like these types of things, I'm sure are true. And I'm sure they're true in relationships too.
Yeah. And I also think sometimes people don't listen because they think they're right. And they're so convinced that they're right that they don't really have time for the other person's opinion. It feels like a waste of time. Or they don't listen because they're insecure and they don't want to be challenged. And so it's better to be defensive and defend their point of view than having to open themselves up to, well, maybe I'm not right about this.
Right. So I do believe that there are times when someone in the higher position won't ask questions because they don't feel like they could change anything. They might not be afraid of what comes at them, because then perhaps this means that they have to do something about it. Right.
Well, that goes to the heart of trying to control people. And, any employer knows you can control your employees, but you often get blowback in terms of morale and performance. You can make people do stuff, but it's so much better if they want to do the best for you. And that's the difference. So I think when we're trying to control people, there's a story I was thinking of that maybe you can hear how it relates. When I was working in a school, I was working with some kids who had I was working with a kid who had broken into a lot of cars and stolen a lot of tape decks and a lot of sound systems and stuff. He was really skating on thin ice in terms of being out of jail, And I knew he didn't want to talk to a counselor or a therapist. I knew he would just roll his eyes and snort, saying, "You need to talk to this guy." I mean, the guy with the beard? Yeah. Well, so how am I going to make a connection with him? How am I going to form a connection? And I wanted to help him turn around his life and unlock his potential and go to college and all this stuff. But I realized that was just what I wanted. That was all my story. So what I finally did when I met him was I asked him which were the best tape decks and sound systems to steal. Which ones were the really good ones? Like was this one better than that one? I asked him, I did not know the answer to this. I was genuinely inquiring what were the good brands of sound systems. I said, because I want to get a really good one for my car. And I figured you're the guy to ask because you really know. And that was legit. And he did know. And he told me, and we started talking. And I hadn't been moralizing, telling him, you should really not steal stuff. He knew that. Cops had told him that and stuff. But it made for a nice connection. So I wasn't trying to control him.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to connect with them through asking a question.
Yeah. And that takes effort, right? I mean, I think for some of us, we're better at it. I mean, I know for myself, I didn't develop those skills until my like early 30s, and I was part of a ski club in New Hampshire, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden I was meeting people and I was socializing and I was getting really good at small talk and
Mhm.
Yeah.
looking for something that we could connect on, something where the conversation could kind of begin to really go somewhere, like looking for that thing and then letting the conversation kind of bloom from there. And I believe this isn't it is something that you can learn. And I don't know that everyone knows that, or just they think they're
Mhm.
not good at it, so they're going to retract.
Mhm.
And it can be very draining for some people. It is
Mm.
for me. Um, but I guess we have to decide that it's worth it. Yeah. Yeah. I what Christy was saying about the that perhaps the waste of time, talking to folks and or maybe having a defensive posture, or being right is more important than, all of the
Mhm.
other things. And in your view, in terms of, moving towards healthy relationships and the benefits around healthy relationships, this might be a stretch, but in business and corporate, we're often thinking about the bottom line, and humans kind of get deprioritized in that. And
Mhm.
I really do believe that there's much more that could happen in these environments with human beings, and that businesses would do even better if they could incorporate more of this. And if you guys could speak to the, like, I don't want to use the words goals and objectives, but like, what are like the most beautiful things that come out of relationships that are moving in ways where folks are dedicated and working and living with inside of health. I forget the words you used, Jerry, right off the bat, in terms of that kind of being the goal, like, or not the goal so much as just deciding that we're going to be within health. We're working towards health.
Mhm.
Cherishing, I think he said.
Mhm.
Cherishing.
I think that when people feel controlled, they want to withhold,
Mm-hmm.
and they resent the people controlling them, and so they become stingy, and they don't want to give too much because somebody's trying to take from them. But on the other hand, if somebody feels really appreciated and valued, they will give everything. And because we all want to be valued and appreciated. And so I think corporations get it really wrong when they treat their employees as less than, and we need to get this from them, and we need to make sure that they don't do this. And they, when there's this whole controlling attitude, it makes people passive aggressive, really. It makes them
Mhm.
withhold. But if you feel like, hey, we brought you here because we trust you, we know you're good workers, we know you add so much value here, we're lucky to have you, those people want to give everything. They want to live up to the expectations that they're great and that they have a lot to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I would add the word pride, that if you can create a situation where someone feels proud of being associated with you, whether it's your spouse or the company you work for, and the feeling pride and excitement. One of the things that Steve Jobs did so well, and sometimes his actual performance of the company didn't quite match the level of him doing this as well, was create an air of excitement that something new is happening, and you are so lucky to be working with us as we're entering this new phase, because great things are about to happen.
Hmm.
Right. So,
Yeah.
you can be proud to work for this company,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to do so well. It's
Yeah.
like a forward view. It's a forward vision. And in a marriage, it means I am really proud of you. We have our ups and downs, but at the end of the day, I want to be seen with you and hang out with you and have fun with you because I'm proud of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I will say that there have been times, I know I've been kind of in the speaker circuit a little bit. So I know people who speak inside of corporations and who speak
Mm-hmm.
in other types of environments. And, there's often a desire, companies want to bring in some kind of excitement or rah-rah. And sometimes they'll bring in people from the outside to try to bring that on. And there can be a kind of rolling of the eyes of the,
Right.
the people, because it feels a little tacit. And
Well, and it's
just,
also, who is this guy? Who is this
right,
person?
right,
Why should we listen? We don't know this person.
right,
Who are they? And
right.
how am I involved with this person? That's fake.
Yeah.
I mean, this has to come from people you actually know and work with.
Right.
Who who shows up and is one of you.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Just it can depend so much on what the mission of the company itself can kind of get in the way of this as well. It's quite complicated.
Yeah,
I'm sure
can I
go
throw
ahead.
out one and then I'll be
Yeah.
quiet for a bit? I promise. Tesla,
Yeah.
Elon Musk, last week or a week or two, texts. What is he? He tweets. He doesn't write sentences. He just tweets out that the economy is really going to rot in the next year.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to make plans to let 10,000 of you go.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. Imagine showing up for work the next day, having read that. It's the exact opposite of making people feel seen and valued.
Right.
Anyone who works for him who's not putting their resume together to go look for other electric vehicle companies right now is crazy, because he's made it clear that I don't care for you. You're just another number. You're one of the 10,000. Maybe you won't be one of the 10,000. Either way, it's a demoralizing place to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Have either of you experienced really good, true appreciation at work in your prior roles when you had more traditional employer-employee relationship?
Nope.
And what did it look like? And I don't remember who I'm first with. So Christy, are you this time?
Christy,
the saddest thing is that I first, all these bad examples came to my head.
Yeah.
But I did have one boss that I felt appreciated by. And it was great. I felt a lot of freedom, and because he trusted me and I didn't feel micromanaged. I felt like I had the freedom to do my job and do it well. And he was there to support me. And that was about it, which was great.
So how did getting really brass tacky here, how did it show up in terms of support? Just kind of checking in with you. Do you need anything? Did you have regular meetings? How did it actually look?
Yeah, we had regular meetings, and if I needed extra supervision, I could reach out, and he was always available. And he always communicated, you're doing a great job. He would tell me good things. And I've had the opposite experience, and it just can really ruin your whole work environment. So I appreciated that.
Right. How about you, Jerry?
I've worked within school systems for about 26 years, and schools have all these different parts that are supposed to work together. And a good leader would help make that happen. And theoretically, like within a high school, say a principal is the one who everyone looks to set the tone. Yeah. And what often would happen is the day back from summer vacation, there'd be an incredible speech.
Yeah.
You people are amazing. You're the finest people I've ever worked with. We're going to do great things. I think the world of you. Then came real life a few weeks later, and it becomes clear that the different systems within the building are not necessarily not only working together really well, but don't even really know exactly what you do. And it's crazy to me how you can walk around a building and not know what someone actually does and see them for a year. Someone once told me it's going to take you a year to like get to know faces and names. And in the second year, you'll figure out like what they actually do here.
Yeah.
So, wouldn't it be nice to be able to put that on the table? What does a guidance counselor do? And how can it help a principal? And when there's a crisis, with someone who wants to hurt themselves. Is that a school nurse issue, or is that a mental health issue? What is that? These kind of conversations do take time, but when you involve the right participants, they feel like finally someone's asking these right questions. If you just start the year for the second year in a row or the eighth year in a row with the same speech, and then it doesn't mean anything 3 months later, you got status quo.
Right. So something that looked bright and shiny at the beginning, but then nothing to back it up when the day-to-day realities came back in.
Big hat, no cattle, I say in Texas.
Yeah. So attention to that, the doldrums, because I really do think that's where our energy sinks, and we can have some kind of offsite or, retreat type of experience, and everyone feels great for 3 days. And then, we return to, and the status quo is really where the rubber meets the road.
That's like in a relationship, you can have a great date.
Yeah.
And then, with your partner.
Yeah.
And then
I think I want to add to the boss that was great. I had two, but they cared about me as a person.
Yeah.
Aside from my role as an employee, I felt like if I had a real problem in my personal life, they cared about me in that way also.
This goes back to what I've experienced, and what I haven't asked directly, but I feel that it's a lack of capacity on some bosses' parts, and also a lack of, I don't know if obtuse is the right word that comes into this, but just kind of that's not my role, but I do think that exists in some environments that, they can get that other places. They can read a book to learn how to, I don't know, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's unfortunate. And I also think, though, that it gets a little bit complicated when if perhaps you have a very large team.
Yes.
And you have projects to work on too, and your entire time, you don't have all of the time to dedicate towards fostering these relationships. So a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. You can't care deeply about everyone. Nobody has that capacity. So it's a certain caring, but yeah.
I'm interested in the language that people use. Like when you've got like a lot of people at a corporation and a lot of teams and a lot of things that have to be done, are the leaders saying, we can do this? Or they're saying, you've got to do this? It feels different. It's the same thing as in a marriage or in a personal relationship. When someone said, we can figure this out. We can figure out the quarterly taxes. We can figure this out. Feels so much nicer than someone saying, did you do the taxes yet?
Right. Yeah. And this is making me think immediately, because I've been in a more functional role my entire career. So, I'm not really in the thick of like what the business does. I'm support staff. And I think a lot of times there's a victim type of mentality that happens, like, their decisions are affecting us.
Yes.
And it comes down and it feels heavy. And plus it being a partnership, let's
talk about that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, in the type of therapy that we're doing, relational life therapy, we love to say we don't do victims.
Okay.
We don't allow people to stay in this victim status and then get bonus points or medals for how awful things are.
Sure.
So we encourage people to find their voice, find their footing, figure out their leverage, and speak up. And sometimes that does mean speaking truth to power. So it's got to be a kind of work situation where you're not going to get fired if you speak the truth, and you have to find the right way. Just as we work with individuals in a relationship, find the right way so that a great message doesn't get lost in the delivery. Same issue, though.
This is bringing me to something else I had kind of in my notes here about, Jerry, in our prior call, you had mentioned a group of firefighters and how they really desired to talk to people like them, right?
Yes.
They didn't want, as you said, the lady psychologist or however they said it, to come in and attempt to help them or understand them. I don't know all of the ins and outs there, but
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Will a subgroup, let's just call it a subgroup, accept someone else walking in who's not organically part of that group saying, okay, we're going to figure out a solution here today? Generally, no. When people walk in, when people are in a group, any group, the group looks at the leader, and the only questions in the room are, who is this person and what do they want from me?
Mm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't pass the credentialing test, like, this person doesn't know what it's like to be on the front lines as a firefighter.
Right.
I'm not going to talk to them because they just took a class in counseling at John Jay or something. I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do it. So then nothing gets done and nothing positive happens. So it just gets undermined. And that's a big thing, actually, a big obstacle. I don't think managers understand that as much. They kind of send someone into these meetings and person gets slaughtered,
Yeah. Well, there's parallels here. I mean, I worked in restaurants for a very long time, and I see it even now in management consulting, that someone who has done every job in the restaurant, like for real, like they actually were the person cutting the vegetables in the back, and then they were on the line, and then they were waiting tables.
Credentials,
and now they're the manager. We'll listen to that person. But
that's right.
Sometimes you don't even need to know those credentials. You can just feel it. The way they look at you, the way they understand the environment. It's unspoken, it's intrinsic. It's and it happens in management consulting too, when we have someone who's come in straight out of college, and then 15 years later, those executives have a much different, I don't know what it's
energy.
Yeah, exactly. Energy. And it's fortunate, but it's not, we can't do that every time. It's not reality.
But I think the energy is same as I've been there and I get it. And I see you.
Yes.
It's not, I'm not coming in one up telling you as an expert. It's I'm seeing you as a same as.
Right.
And this area, in the area of diversity and inclusion training, I'm going to bring this up so you don't have to. This is just rife with misjudgment about how to do it. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I've been there as someone who was asked to participate in bringing in experts to help our school with diversity and inclusion issues. Did we have problems? Yeah, we had real problems with it. Did the experts coming in know the problems? No. Did they ask us what the problems were? No. They had a presentation, and they were from Harvard. And the first thing they did, this was a day where we had tension between Black and Latino kids and Native kids who were Caucasian and of Polish origin and Italians. We had the whole enchilada happening, right? But their presentation centered around each of us picking up a random piece of fruit. It was like a cutout of a piece of fruit, all different fruit, putting it on our shirt, and then walking around the room feeling what it would be like to be a pineapple when other people are an orange or an apple or something. These are high school teachers who have master's degrees, and they're like slamming their head against the desk, like, we really are capable of speaking about tough things out loud. Why won't you let us? And how much are these people being paid to be here and talk to us about fruit?
Yeah, it really is.
Wow.
It is a thing. And I had made a note here about this, coming back to Christy had mentioned that, that insecurity sometimes breeds some interesting behavior. And when we have folks in my environment, and it happened even in restaurants, and so perhaps it happens other places, where you have someone kind of coming in from the side. So maybe they're a manager straight out of college and never had to wait tables to earn a living, which is something I, of course, had this chip on my shoulder around. And the effectiveness of that individual, and usually there's this overlay of the insecurity that's coming out in really unfortunate ways, right?
Yes.
And so, like, I'd be interested for you guys to talk about about that, about what is happening. I guess these are defensive postures, and it certainly isn't helping them to be more empathetic, which is what we would want them to move towards, right?
Yes. I think insecurity is the root of most problems in relationships, because if you're insecure, but you have some humility and you can speak about the insecurity and ask for help, that's a strength. But most people don't do that. Most people feel less than. And so they either don't stand up to the challenge or they try to cover up the insecurity and the imposter syndrome with grandiosity and defensiveness and acting like they know better more than they do. And who are you to question me? And you have to do it because I said so. But it's really covering up. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I hope nobody else figures it out.
Right.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I also think that there's usually a fear on management's part of letting the people who are really doing the actual daily work get together and vent with each other about what it's like to do it. There's a fear that I don't know. It's a pretty irrational fear because if you think about it, they have a lot in common. They're the most knowledgeable people about what's happening. They know what their frustrations are, and maybe they can point to some solutions. But in fact, it's often discouraged. It's just seen as venting, complaining. They're going to, waste time. They could be working. And and then it just fosters everyone in it for themselves. You don't even know how your neighbor with the same job description is handling it.
Well, and it leads to what we were talking about before. If you're insecure, you're going to try to keep others down and you're going to try to control them and you're going to be afraid that they're going to challenge you or supersede you in certain things. If you're confident, you're going to help people grow. You're not going to feel like there's a lack of available opportunity. You're going to be like, oh, I can really see potential in this person and I'm going to help him grow instead of, oh no, this is competition. What if he gets to be better than I am? Or what if she's more talented? I've got to control this thing,
Yeah. And that fear, I think I've seen it. I see it all the time. One of the conditions of the environment where I am is that there's a lot of turnover. It's just part and parcel to the industry, and people will come into this. They have really great pedigrees coming in, and they can kind of dip their toe into a lot of things by going into management consulting. But a lot of folks after 18 months to 2 years leave. But as a result, it fosters an environment of insecurity. And I've been there almost 20 years. And in the beginning, I think I felt it a lot. I was very emotionally aware that there was dissonance. And over time, through exactly this, expressing my voice, the podcast has only been around for several weeks, but through the process of doing that side business I was telling you about and the speaking, that I have a lot more compassion for these people than I once did. I think there was resentment back in the day, but now I understand, they're extraordinarily bright human beings, and I'm there to help them, to foster a portion of within their career. And I guess this is kind of bringing me to this idea around compassion and sensitivity towards other humans. So whether it's your primary, your partner or your coworkers, and how we can do this when maybe they're not extending the same towards you, or it doesn't feel like they are.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Compassion is a spiritual practice that you have to work on cultivating regardless of what's going on around you, if you're taking it seriously. Otherwise, you're just responding to nice people who, if someone's nice to me, I'll respond to them back in a nice way. And I hope I run across a compassionate person today. That's different from, I'm going to bring the compassion to those around me because I like living that way. And they're either going to respond with the same kind of energy or not. And then it's their loss if they haven't,
I also think, I agree. I think it's Brene Brown that said it's hard to hate people close up. People can be very annoying and off-putting, but usually if you take the time, and I know time's a scarce resource, but to really get to know them, you start to like them. You start to have compassion. You start to understand why they're the way they are. And they're so interesting. People are so interesting.
Right.
And so I don't know. I try to look at people with curiosity, like, I wonder why they're acting that way. I wonder where they came from or where they got that and what's really going on. And usually it really is hard to hate people close up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it involves identifying at least one thing about them that you can authentically like and admire. I didn't admire that kid broke into cars and stole people's stuff. I did admire, after I got to know him for a while, that he was kind of a caring big brother to his sibling, you know? So there is something you can admire about most people, even if you disagree with some of their behaviors.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feared in the past, before we had the pandemic and working remotely, so much of the time in my role, we had gone to a more and more like less human interface for dealing with our requests that came in from the staff, which I didn't care for. And I realized over the years, it was because it just felt too transactional. One of the things that makes this job worth doing is actually the fact that I'm helping another human being. And when I'm just responding to a computer interface, it doesn't feel like that. And so the more that we've been able to use instant message has actually been nice. I enjoy that those chat features, and these days companies are using things like Skype and no, not Skype. Slack. It's hard to keep all of these things straight. But in the remote world, I think that this is one of the things that the proponents of back to office are worried about. How do we cultivate this in a remote world? And with you both having done your work remotely and to some extent still doing portions of it remotely, what would you say to that?
Oh, I just wanted to say something. I think that it's so important I think it's so much more important for someone to feel heard and validated than to get what they want. I think if you're just doing things through text or email, whatever, and they're just asking for something and it's transactional and then you turn them down, I mean, they can be really upset and, because they were never heard. But if you're talking to someone and you sit and listen and say, oh, I can totally see why that would make more sense. And I can see why that's really frustrating. I totally get it. I would want that too, if I were in your shoes. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to give you that right now. But
right.
that is a very valid and fair request.
Right.
They're going to be able to say, oh, well, at least you got my point. At least I was heard. Right.
Right. It can get combative if you don't do that type of thing. I've seen it. And, but I've also had the experience of talking to folks on, me being the consumer on a customer support line, someone reading a script that kind of tries to get at what you just described. And it's so terrible, isn't it? Because it's
I was going to say that, like, people, like when you call a place and they say your call's important to us,
right?
It's like people, I know it's not important to you now. I know it's not important. You would have answered if it was.
Right. It's an interesting thing because in my role, and I think that this happens in other people's work. We kind of think we're the only ones with the particular struggle. Then again, this is what I enjoy about your podcast is that you're describing struggles that everyone has, so we can like move past the shame and actually get to something else. But the struggle around, now did I lose my train of thought? That often the perfect solution doesn't really exist, or we don't have the money, or we don't have the time, or whatever it is. And I've learned over the years how important it is to explain a few points of why. And it doesn't take me that long to do it. It's not like I'm, but in the times that we've looked at in the past, these are the things, these were the barriers. And it just helps that brand new employee, the person who's just entered the workforce, be able to kind of digest it, fully understand it, be able to explain it to their superior. Again, it's been an evolution for me, but that type of just tuning into where are they coming from and what will help them to know that, this is what we've got. And as you said, I recognize that the need is there, that you've been asked to find this thing. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to meet the need. And that being heard and validated. And, it's recently, I don't know if I was listening in the last 24 hours, Christy, you said out loud in one of the podcasts of your own about how if you want to experience or have mercy from your partner, extend mercy. If you know, and then I just started adding words to that list, like compassion, give compassion, appreciation, give appreciation. And at work, you know, those things exist too. And I think that this is a perfect example where you can do that. I mean, in my role, where yes, I would love it if maybe some of the executives really understood the complexities or what's difficult about my job, if I really felt heard, you know, that's what we're talking about. But the more that I hear the people I'm supporting, I feel like I'm shoring myself up in some way just with that energy, if that makes sense. Hey, so it's Linda here. Pretend you just had a musical interlude. We had a little bit of a technical mishap while we were recording. So this is a bit of an intermission. The internet literally went down in my home. It didn't go down the entire pandemic, all of that time working from home. And it was seriously down, like neighborhood down for 4 or more hours. So thank goodness Jerry and Christy were able to connect again the very next day, and we finished up the recording. So that is what you hear next. All right, here it is. Okay, welcome back, Christy, and we will have Jerry on in just a second. I am so glad that you were able to get on again so soon after this technical glitch yesterday. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, so I was able to go through what we already talked about, and I have like 3 to 4-ish like things that I want to either touch base back on. The thing that I was talking about when we got cut off, and I know I could hear you both kind of acknowledging what I was saying, but then at some point I could no longer hear you. So I was touching back to what I heard you say, Christy, about how, you know, if you want to receive mercy, you give mercy. And, you know, you kind of are the things that you're looking for, perhaps you extend. Yes. Mm-hmm. And what more would you say about that? And, you know, to the extent that you could even think about it in a work environment.
Yeah, well, first I'll say a lot of times I say it's like they're staring each other down across a parking lot saying, you go first. Like, why should I have to do this when you haven't done this? And it's this part of us that wants justice. But the reason that we need to go first and extend mercy or extend patience or forgiveness or give the benefit of the doubt is because it really is in our best interest.
Yeah.
If we want to have that kind of a relationship, then we're going to benefit from it if we give it. Right. And it's hard because you have to kill your ego first in order to take that step. And our ego can be very strong. It can be very strong-willed and very self-righteous. Like, why should I have to? But that's what I always say. It's in your best interest. And in a work environment, you know, the dynamics are different because of the power hierarchy and the power structure, but it still works in that if you can give people the benefit of the doubt, like, I wonder why they're doing this. What's behind this? If you can have curiosity, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, I think for me, giving people the benefit of the doubt and assuming no malintent has been a huge, you know, it was almost like a mantra at some point, and now it's just become the thing. I'm not assuming the worst, and I have experience from some coworkers that they will actually read the worst in certain, you know, in an email exchange or something like that. This also goes to what Jerry referred to as the spiritual practice of just kind of being what you know, being the compassionate one in an environment that might not feel compassionate. Not easy, that's for sure. And especially when egos rule the environment, if that's the culture in that particular environment. So the topic of, you know, the victim and you all were sharing how Terry Reals, you know, that he teaches and you teach that you don't do victim, right? And that you teach people to find their voice and to speak up for themselves, and they're potentially risking something when they do that. I find all of this really interesting because in the workplace, it's true that depending on how things come down, you could be risking your employment. But I think that there was this touch on, you know, the delivery of, you know, when you are going to begin to take voice and maybe you might be coming across with a certain defensiveness or a tone that isn't helpful, right? So like, what is the advice or recommendation around the delivery when you begin to stand up for yourself?
So we use this thing we call the feedback wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's everything is from the I, and it's very hard to take offense if you follow it strictly. And basically it's when this happened or when this was said, you have to be very specific. The meaning I gave to it was, or what I made up about that was, and it tells the person where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me feel
Mm-hmm.
this way.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you can stop. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was that your intent?
Mm-hmm.
And it gives the person a chance to clarify and understand where you're coming from, instead of, why did you do this, and get defensive. It's,
Mm-hmm.
hey, when you
Mm-hmm.
changed my position on this, I made up that you don't value what I was doing for this project. And I'm feeling kind of sad and hurt and a little scared that maybe I'm not valued. Can you help me understand what was going on?
Yeah. Yeah. I've learned that through reading Brene Brown's material as well. It's interesting that in the corporate exchange, which is what she describes, she's taken out the, it's made me feel this way. She said, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Yesterday when X and such happened, just kind of reframing so they know what experience or example you're talking about. And then can you tell me more about that? Like she immediately puts it on the other person to explain what was actually happening.
It's probably better
to
take out some of the feelings in the corporate world.
Yeah. I mean, you do add in the story I'm telling myself, which I think is really helpful. And I used it once with my boss and it was extremely effective. I'm concerned that some people might not have a boss that would receive that easily. Is that the case sometimes? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's the hard part about the corporate world is you might have a terrible boss and there might not be much you can do, to be honest. I mean,
right. And I mean, I've got to think it happens in couples in a not so great relationship that someone could come back with why the hell would you think that? Why would that be your story?
Or they say, that's not my problem. That's not my problem.
Yeah,
if you're making that up, that's your problem.
Yeah.
And it's not a caring, loving response of repair. It's just, I mean, that's the hard part about relationships. You can only control yourself. You cannot control the other party.
Right.
So you do what you can to be true to the best person that you want to be, but you have to detach from the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I believe that this is somewhat linked to, we were just talking about, not being in victim state. And I think of, hi, Jerry.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. The victim state and the, and like complaining and how that can be very, very taxing and not helpful in some ways. But we also talked about the need to have spaces where we can vent or share our experience, maybe with other people who really get our jobs, do our jobs the same way. Like what's the line there? Where do we go from complaining to, I would like clarity around that, if there is any.
I have a thought about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Complainers are well known to fellow employees.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's coming down, they're going to complain about it. Mm-hmm. Did you hear they're giving us Monday off instead of Friday? Something like that. Get a load of that. Or they changed where the coffee cups go, something like it's just there's always something that person's complaining about. Mm-hmm. And that's different from getting together with your peers and asking, is there not a better way that we could move this project forward or something like that? My experience is really frustrating with it. What about yours?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So chronic complainers
are
really, they just suck the life out of an organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And venting is more of a moment thing. Like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Can I just vent for a minute?
Yeah.
And then, sure. Vent. We all have to vent sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I remember once when I was working for an agency that was dealing with kids from New York City, you had to have a treatment plan in place every 3 months and sent to this one place and approved. But there was a different office in New York City that had to receive a different part of the treatment plan, and both had to be approved, and they were on different schedules, different addresses. It was really insane. Like whoever invented that, it was really bad. And all of us were working in rooms next to each other, but one woman was losing it so much she was throwing documents around the room and screaming and yelling and stuff like that. And it just would have been so much better to gather and ask, how are you dealing with this?
Right.
It's impossible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Great. Let's see. I have a couple of other. Yeah,
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
I think venting is, you can vent in perspective. Complaining is just overall negative.
Yeah.
But venting is like, is the problem? Can you put it in perspective and just vent about this thing?
Yes. Okay. And somewhat related to this, when someone is coming at you in a defensive tone, what is the best offense, I guess? If you had any advice for that.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Asking more questions, getting quieter, listening more. It's very hard for someone who's defensive and upset to keep it up in the face of understanding, empathy, encouragement, curiosity, all those things. They're going to calm themselves down.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. I have the belief that, that there are nuggets in there of truth, and that sometimes the other person can't see or hear them if it's too cloaked in that defensive, coat, I guess. But I would love it if more bosses or people in the place of authority just could be in that curious state and really be able to pull out the nuggets and ask questions about, what's coming up. But I know
that's a bold leader. It's a bold leader who can look at the way we're doing things and ask questions of the people who are doing it. Like, is this the best way? Is this working?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who's in the travel industry. And so her entire world was shut down for 2.5 years. And she had to let go of some of her staff, or they went, on hiatus for a while. And they had complained about a particular type of software for years. And then my friend was having to deal with the software because now she was taking on all of aspects of the job with, diminished staff. And she said, like, the reality of their complaints really came through. She said, but I recognized that I had difficulty seeing and hearing, and because of the way that it was coming across towards me. But she was able to reflect, and she did that in a group, and I thought, this is fantastic, just to hear her express that, and others potentially to learn from it. And I feel that I have really made a move to try to be calmer, more curious, and look for what's really happening and ask questions. I also wanted to ask about insecurity. We had said in the first half of this that happened yesterday that, Krista, you had said that insecurity really is the root of most relationship problems. And I'm assuming that that you all speak of self-esteem as the opposite of this, or is there a different term or characteristics that you use to describe like the opposite side of this? And then how does one build? How does one move from insecurity to self-esteem?
Yeah, I call it self-esteem, healthy self-esteem. It's being able to hold yourself in warm regard as a flawed human being, knowing that I'm a person that has worth, and that I matter, and I also have flaws, and that's okay. And so does everybody else. So we're all worth the same. And so, yeah, the practice is to, when you're feeling shame, pull yourself back up. No, I'm an employee I deserve to work here. I'm working hard. I might have made a mistake, but nobody else is perfect either. And I belong here. I deserve to be here. Or if you're going up into grandiosity, it's also not healthy self-esteem. If you're looking down your nose at other people and judging everybody, it's no, I have different skills. I'm not better than them. I'm just different. So let me pull myself off my high horse and really see them for their differences. Because we usually judge each other based on different qualities. I mean, I just had a couple in here this morning where she's a list maker and she can complete tasks so well. And so it's really hard for her to not look down at her husband who really struggles in that area. But he's really good at other things.
Right.
And so sometimes we have a hard time seeing that when we're upset or frustrated.
Yeah. And grandiosity, say more about it overall, if you can.
Grandiosity is thinking that you're better than other people, that you know better, that your way is the right way. It's having contempt for others. And when you are grandiose or when you're looking down at people, you can't really see them. You can't, you're too much in judgment to hear them, to understand them, to see their point of view, because you already think you know better.
And is this also undermined by, I mean, not undermined, but is essentially insecurity underneath it all, or no?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always.
All right.
I mean, psychology has thought for a long time that underlying narcissism is a tremendous insecurity. But there's also a type of narcissist who's just entitled, just an entitled jerk. Who has always been told that everything they do is better than everyone else.
Right.
And is not doubting themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there can be two different types of narcissists. And oftentimes these narcissists do very well in business. And do things like invent electric car companies and things that go to the moon and stuff like that.
It's interesting. And I know how this comes across, but I mean, are the characteristics, the way that it comes across in tone, right? And the way that someone speaks to you, looks at you, how else does it come across characteristically?
Well, they're not even looking at you. They're looking at you briefly and then looking around the room, see if there's someone more interesting than you are around, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Or they're talking down to you, or they're just lecturing or talking at you. They're very seldomly listening.
Right.
Yeah, they're terrible listeners. There's something I wanted to say about how it was your previous question about self-esteem. And I think it's important to look at the metric when you're working for a company of how am I going to regard my success? What am I going to use to determine success? And it's wonderful when you're at a place where the company's metric for success aligns with your own personal one. But it may not be that way. If you self-publish a small novel and you're so happy with how it looks and it's available on Amazon so your friends and family can buy it, and you sold 75 copies of this beautiful book, is that not a success? But what about the moment when you look and say it's rated 4,300,000 in Amazon sales? So which are you going to take in and walk away with? Right.
No, I completely agree. All right. And then when is it time to bail? This in relationships at some point, it might be time to separate. And I wonder if some of the same things one would be looking at. I don't know. Again, I'm the student here. Do you think there are any
podcast
parallels?
Right?
Yeah.
When is it time to bail?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you start to bail when you don't feel valued at all. When your contribution is not valued, that you can't grow. You feel really stuck and confined and contained by these people that just want you to fit a cog in a wheel instead of actually contribute something. And if you feel like there's no one to talk to, that there's no one you can go to for help because nobody really cares, it's probably not a good organization for you. You're stuck. You're not going to reach your potential.
I would add to that, if you feel like you're drowning every day, not having a difficult time, but drowning, like your essential who you are, what you are is just being obliterated every day. And there's no one to ally with and try and make things better with. You've got to really ask, what am I doing at this place?
Excellent. Good questions to ask. Now on the flip side of this, overall, I like people to think about what it means to be satisfied in one's work
Hmm.
and or in one's life. And Jerry, like you were just saying, it could be some combination of things,
Hmm.
including outside pursuits of writing a book and having a day job or whatever those things are. How is this defined for you each? Jerry, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm just finishing 17 short stories in a book
That's
and a
fantastic.
memoir. And I have the goal of publishing it, self-publishing it
Mm-hmm.
by September. And I'm working
Mm-hmm.
with cover designer and people like that, trying to get some blurbs for it. And I'm
Yeah.
adoring these short stories. I have no illusion that it's going to sell beyond
Yeah.
people I know because
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, that's given me great pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I also get great pleasure from helping people in the practice and the teaching people things in the workshops that I do with Christy. So, and the podcasts bring me great
Mm-hmm.
pleasure. So I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're getting to the point where you wake up and have great pleasure many times during the day, that's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good thing.
And do you think that's is it achievable out the gate? I mean, is it something
Mm.
that I think it's something we should expect and aspire to. Um,
Yeah, I
but
think
yeah,
this is why you hear this more from people who are older than age
yeah,
50.
right.
I mean, I think between the ages of 25 and 55
Yeah.
is pretty much a different animal for a lot of people. Don't have
Mm-hmm.
these kind of luxuries of just, it sounds great, wonderful
Mm-hmm.
day, but that's not
Mm-hmm.
the reality when you're
Right.
really working hard and have a family and children at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it's important to keep moving forward though. Like
Mm.
I definitely think you have to pay your dues. I mean, I there was a time when I was newly divorced. I had 3 jobs and I had
Mm.
to work a graveyard shift every once in a while
Mm.
and I was exhausted,
Mm.
but I found joy in all of the jobs because of the people I connected with, because I felt like I was making a difference to someone
Mhm.
and I had good relationships along the way. And I believed in my work, and also because I was working towards something. I
Mhm.
knew that one day I wanted my own private practice, and I knew that I had to do all these things to be able to get there one day.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you have to pay your dues, but you can find joy along the way, and you need some purpose that you're working
Yes.
That's
for.
actually another thing that Christy and I had in common that we didn't realize until we started really talking about it. She was doing just what she said, getting ready to leave a system to start her private practice. And I was 26 years in the school
Mhm.
system
Mhm.
with a part-time private practice ready to jump into
Mhm.
mine. So we
Mhm.
went through that in a similar time frame as well.
Mhm. I identify quite a bit with this moving towards something quite a bit. And so, Christy, you were just describing how, as you're kind of in the thick of it, paying your dues, that you're working towards something. Yes. And even now, would you say that still characterizes, aspects of the work that you do, that you're moving towards something?
Oh yeah, I don't
Mhm.
think it will ever stop. It's just the
Yeah.
next thing that you're excited about and the next thing you're working on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Yes, yes. It's good for me to hear these things, and hopefully for others to hear these things too. So I appreciate you both so much. And I'm gonna wrap up and just say this has been fantastic. And any final words from either of you?
Thank you for having us on. It was so
Yeah.
fun.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Linda. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
There you have it. This episode is in the books. You can find Jerry and Christy on any podcast platform when you search for Love Work, all one word. The subtext is Skills for Relational Life. You can also find them at their website, loveworkrelationships.com, exactly as it sounds, loveworkrelationships.com, no hyphens, no anything else in there. You'll find there links to their bios, their practices, the podcast itself, and also their relational couples boot camps that they have East Coast, West Coast, and also online. And if you have any questions or comments about the episode, anything you'd wished that we had spent more time on, Or separately, any stories from the corporate front lines, send them my way. I'd love to know what's hitting, what's going on in your unique workplace environment, all of it. You can send me a note or a recorded message to linda@workdopepod.com. That's Linda at workdope, WORKDOPEPOD.com. Until next time, this is Linda Stacy, and I'm signing off for Work Dope. Bye-bye.